Hey, what's going on, everyone? Nicky Skevich here with Daily Fantasy Winners. Got the next edition of Tee to Green here for you. And it's for the St. Jude Classic in Memphis, Tennessee, typically at the TPC Southwind course, which it is again this year. And so this is the last tournament before the U.S. Open at Shinnecock next week. And so this is a week, actually, that I would recommend to people that they either limit their ownership or limit the amount of lineups they do, lower their stakes, whatever it might be. Maybe you just want to pass this week. And actually, passing this week is perfectly fine. This is a very high variance week usually for a few different reasons. The first reason is that, as you can see, some few names here on your screen are already crossed out, and there's more people that are crossed out below this. And that's because these people have already withdrawn from this tournament. And if you don't know much about how the golf season works around this time of year, well, just at this specific time of the year, really. Yesterday, today's Tuesday, leading up to the TPC Southwind tournament, but yesterday, meaning Monday, the Monday after the Memorial Tournament, that is U.S. Open sectional qualifying day. It's the last stage for people to get into the U.S. Open. And so some PGA Tour players who have played in the U.S. Open in the past, and it would take a while for me to go into all like the specific details about it, but long story short, there are PGA Tour players who have not qualified to be in the U.S. Open itself, and they have to play in the final stage of qualifying to get into the U.S. Open. They have to go back to square one and play in like the local qualifying. There are certain like qualifications or stipulations that like you can bypass certain things, and again, like I said, it's pretty complicated, but. So any case, that's why you see like Keegan Bradley crossed off on this list and like Adam Scott crossed off on this list. They played in the sectional qualifying at a course near Columbus, near like where the Memorial was on Monday, and they ended up making it through, and they're fine. So they weren't entered to be in this golf tournament this week at TPC Southwind in case they did not make qualifying there. So therefore, they would have had to like win this week. I believe they would have had to win this week, or maybe like finish like in the top like few places. I don't remember the exact qualification, but it doesn't matter. They're in the U.S. Open. So there are a lot of people already pulling out here, and including some of the top names actually in this field. So it actually makes, we're going to have some inflated ownership here. It looks like kind of around that 8-9K range. And so that would be, so that's one reason why here it's some high variance, and you might have some people withdraw here. And I feed this into kind of like a part 1B here, is that typically here in the past, if there has been bad weather, people are not, if they're in the U.S. Open already, they're not afraid to withdraw just because they're afraid if like the tournament goes into like Monday because of like rain delays or something like that, that's going to cut into their U.S. Open prep time. And people aren't shy of doing that. And, you know, they'll cite like, oh, like my back's sore or wrist injury or something. And then they're really like just fine, or they like make up some like a tiny tweak or something. The good news is that this year actually looks like, I was just checking the weather in Memphis, and it looks like there's no rain like in the forecast at all until Monday. So it looks like the chances of this are pretty minimal. It's just going to be super hot and super sunny, and like in like the mid to upper 90s or something in Memphis. And wearing long pants, that sounds absolutely brutal. And so it should be okay from that sense. The other reason why this is usually a little bit more high variance, though, is that this is a golf course that has a ton of water hazards, and it's kind of like even though it doesn't really look like a Florida course that much at all, this will play a little bit like it in the sense that there are just a ton of penalty strokes on this golf course, and usually the more penalty strokes there are on the golf course, the higher variance it is. So if there is an angle here I would play this week, it would just be that I'm going to recommend basically a couple of the favorites here, just the guys I like most in cash and GPPs as far as like the most expensive golfers, and just I don't care about ownership. And then I will just say try to differentiate the best you can in the 7K range, because you're going to get a lot more high variance out of those guys, and I think it's just best to jump on some of those like low ownership guys down there. Like Daniel Berger has won this tournament the past couple of years, but if you do take a look at like who's won this tournament also in previous years, it's like Fabian Gomez won it only like a few years ago, and like Greg Owen was up there, and I think it was to look at this. It's like Ben Crane won this like a few years ago as well. Sorry, I couldn't remember that. Like Troy Merritt was runner-up. So it's like you get the idea that like some like random names can really actually just win here and be very close to winning. And so that's why I try and differentiate a little bit, just go with like the favorite guys you like here at the top. But so again, and looking from a statistic standpoint, It is. There isn't one statistic that heavily correlates here, just because it is just a really high variance tournament. Strokes gained approaching the green is the one thing that really does kind of show up here, but it's not even close to as much as the way the Memorial did last week, and so that just tells you right away kind of that there really isn't a ton to go off of this week. It's just more or less the best thing I can recommend here is playing against the high ownerships of the lower salary range. And of course, using the strokes gain putting regression tool, using the strokes gain tee to green regression model, of course, as well, that the Max that's Max's model, of course, on our website and everything like that. And so, yeah, definitely use those kinds of things to your advantage, and those all obviously always give you slight edges, but just not as much as you would normally get in a typical week. But anyways, I'll move through these top guys here real quick and just kind of tell you my thoughts here. We'll start with Dustin Johnson here. Very clearly the odds-on favorite, and deservedly so. This is kind of a weak field here overall, especially with a few people dropping out, I guess, but still, it's DJ Koepka, Phil, Stenson, and Berger, and it's we only have a few of the top 20-ish, top 20, top 25 players, whatever you want to call it, in the world. So DJ, clear odds-on favorite, as he definitely should be. As you can see, he is particularly, he's really good value on both sites, to be quite frank, but he's a particularly good value, I guess. Well, no, he's just good value on both sites. And so if you take a look, obviously, at the strokes gain statistics for DJ, I will slide this over. You can see it's really good all around, for pretty much and everything like that. So it's really funny hearing DJ talk about putting. It's I honestly, I think he just changes the story every time, and maybe that's just typical DJ having fun with the media. But he just said the other day that's he switched putters, and he says, I haven't been making putts all year, and yet he was just in an advertisement of saying how he's been putting really well since he switched to I think it's the Cobra putter or whatever the heck it was, and he's in an advertisement with Justin Rose, Jason Day, I think Romsden, and a couple others. They all use the same type of putter, and it's I don't know. And then DJ said he's been putting well a couple weeks ago since he started using the aim point thing. You just get a different version from DJ each time, and I don't know. He just seems to be that guy that lives in the moment, and so. But according to the statistics, DJ is having one of his best putting years, actually, or maybe it only goes back here through 2013 here for us, but it's since 2013, DJ's having his best putting years in strokes gained right now. So whatever he's doing seems to be fine. And so he's at a minus 0.33. Maybe he's running a little bit hot there. Maybe it's a tiny bit not sustainable for him, but at least he's trying to really work on the putter, and so maybe you give him a little bit of credit for that, as far as him always talking about it. And therefore, but in any case, he's the odds-on favorite. That's the guy I would certainly start with, both cash and GPP wise. Just because I really don't like the 9K range, and even the upper 8K range. I don't really like that as much this week, and so. I'm just fine with loading up on DJ here at the top, and no questions asked. I'll move on to Brooks Koepka here, down at 11,100 here on DraftKings. And so Koepka, it's really interesting. So Koepka obviously is the guy that, he had a wrist injury here at the start of the season, and you see all these NAs for him up here, and that's just because he has only played 16 golf rounds this year on the PGA Tour, or at least the tournaments don't qualify for strokes gained statistics, so he doesn't qualify for any stats. So that's why it's we're getting NAs here and everything and everything like that. But I'll just show you here with Koepka what he has done here so far this year. These are his 2018 stats. Plus 0.196 strokes gained off the tee. That by Koepka standards, that's not performing up to his level. It's decent, or it's fine, just overall, relatively speaking, to everybody on the PGA Tour. But for Koepka standards, what we're seeing too, that's a little bit lower than average. Strokes gained approaching the green, that's minus 0.244. That's definitely below Koepka standards and should be higher than that. He's been decent around the greens at a plus 0.308. And putting-wise, at a plus 0.126. And this is actually the one thing I want to touch on as kind of a spoiler or a sneak preview here for next week with the U.S. Open. In that, for this week, I don't like Koepka probably that much, just because I don't want to pay $11,100, and it's a high variance tournament, and he's still coming back a little bit. It's just one of those situations where I'd rather just play DJ and not think about it. Even though the Koepka has actually done pretty well here at this tournament specifically over the years, but and I do think Koepka is coming back into form, and his wrist seems perfectly fine. But I just think it's one of those things where I would just rather play, again, I would rather play DJ than Koepka if their prices are going to be relatively the same. But just as far as the sneak preview for next week, at Shinnecock with the U.S. Open, I definitely will be liking The strokes gained off the tee guys, and definitely guys that are just like really good drivers of the golf ball, like could hit it a decent length. That's going to be really the key I'm going to focus on for Shinnecock. And the one other thing, though, I was going to point out, though, is with Brooks, is I think, generally speaking, when you talk to, like, unless you like really know everybody's statistics well or know like all the top players' statistics really well, when you ask people just like about Brooks Koepka and you say, okay, if you just asked them, how good of a putter is Brooks Koepka? I think most people have, or at least that I have asked this just as a general question, just to see like what they think. Most people have responded that Koepka is like an average putter. Some have even said below average or like a little above average. But the general consensus is he's about an average putter because everyone thinks of Koepka. And most people think of bombers as like, they're only like average putters, or they're only like slightly above average putters at best. Like that's what most people think of on like the bomber, like really long hitter crowds. Like the same thing would come up with like Rory McIlroy before, like Dustin Johnson before he kind of like started to improve his putting, and even DJ's still like only slightly above average putting. Relatively speaking to the PGA Tour. But if you look at Koepka here, actually, I just want to point this out here, going back in his career, this is 2014. Which was his first year of qualifying for PGA Tour statistics. He's at a plus .162, which is good for 62nd on the PGA Tour. Here's 2015. Plus .421, good for 17th. 2016, he was a plus .445, which is good for 20th. And then 2017, he was a plus .475, which is good for 12th place. Koepka's a really good putter, and I think that kind of goes a little bit unnoticed here as far as like how good of this guy actually, and how high this guy's ceiling really is. Like everybody knew kind of he has high upside, and they saw that on display at the U.S. Open last year, obviously, in the way he tore apart Aaron Hills. But and then he kind of fell off a little bit, and like the wrist injury came into play, obviously, and whatnot. But I think this guy's upside. This is kind of a nice little time to, maybe not this week necessarily, but next week, despite being the U.S. Open champion, and we have yet to see the prices and all that. But just because Koepka's kind of coming back from that wrist injury and his form's not like quite there just yet, I think he's actually going to be a nice buy option next week. On probably both websites, just because he'll probably, because he is defending champion, won't be priced too cheaply, but he'll have like a lower ownership, and I think he's going to fit Shinnecock really well, and it'll be kind of a nice spot to use him. So it's kind of a little bit of a sneak preview. I just wanted to point that out for Brooks. But for this week, I prefer DJ over Brooks, certainly. For Phil, look, this 1.119 just jumps off the page. So for the strokes gained putting this year, which is just not sustainable. Phil's a really good putter, but he ain't that good, and so that's why we have him at a minus 0.75 here for our strokes gained putting regression tool. Obviously, the odds per dollar here is kind of weak for somebody at 10,600. Well, maybe just by comparison to Stenson, it's a little bit weaker. And so I understand Phil, the last handful of times he has played this tournament, he has nearly won like almost every, he hasn't won, but he's nearly won like the last like 5 years. He's always been like second, third, or at least like top 5 or 10 or something like that. He's always been up there. But again, for a high variance tournament, Phil's getting up there in age. You're getting some pretty high variance stuff on a round around basis out of Phil, and it's hard to get the consistency out of him for 4 straight rounds. And if I'm going to play Phil in a tournament where his variance is really up and down, I want him on a lower variance course where there aren't as many penalty strokes, or he can just kind of slap it around there and still carve out just like amazing scoring rounds when he doesn't have his best tee to green game. So 10,600 comparison to Stenson at 10,400 for what this course is, and comparing the two golfers, I prefer Stenson over Phil. I probably lean a little bit away from Phil here. And again, this is just for people that are just making a few lineups, or just 1 or 2 lineups and type of a thing, as far as like what advice I'm giving here for the top guys. If you're making if you just really want to play like a ton of cheap lineups just because you're in the zone and you just want to do it for the fun of it, then of course you can play like all the top guys and play them a little bit. But if you're doing that, then play Phil, I guess, just a little bit. But I would not dump much ownership into Phil if you are going to do that. So yeah, Stenson, here we go. Henrik, I probably like the most of the 10K guys. He's probably my second favorite play overall. Odds per dollar suggest he's good. He's running a little bit hot with the putter, it looks like. Stenson's, unfortunately, again, we don't have the the strokes gained statistics aren't the best for some of the European golfers and Stenson. So like this 2017 and 2016 number, all at zeros, unfortunately. That's just because Stenson hadn't qualified for the PGA Tour strokes gained statistics those past couple of years, just because he played a reasonable amount on the European Tour. He played the major championships, played a few PGA Tour events too, but it just wasn't enough at the end of the day, I guess, to qualify for these stats. And so it's hard to gauge a little bit, but if you see back in 2015, actually, Stenson was a plus 0.436. And if you look at his European Tour stats, you can tell Stenson is generally a pretty good putter, actually, at least over the last few years. So I would actually say that like this minus 0.37 for Stenson is a little bit misleading, and it's probably a little bit more like maybe like a minus 0.1 or 0.2 or something like that at the most. Like I don't think it's as high as minus 0.37. And I'll just slide over and show you Stenson's strokes gained approaching the green is right here, number 3. He is number 3 in strokes gained approaching the green. I believe he was number 1 actually not too long ago, and so dropped down the tiniest bit, but whatever, that's fine. And then Daniel Berger at $10,000. It's fine. I mean, you're paying a bit of a premium because he's only played this event twice, which were the last 2 years, and he won both the last 2 years. So you're certainly paying a premium for Daniel Berger at $10K right now. That's not my favorite thing to do. I would just rather load up much higher on DJ and Stenson despite that. Berger's strokes gained approaching the green is 42nd right now, so it's not like Berger's iron play is bad this year, and it's not like a terrible idea. I just think you're paying a little bit of a premium, and I would prefer Stenson over Berger. I think it's just really kind of that straightforward. And I'll just touch on this really quickly. The 9K range. This 9K range is not very appealing right now. Horschel, he's got some upside at times, but again, this minus 0.32 for his strokes gained putting regression, and he's 112th actually. I'll slide this over so you guys can. Whoops. Okay, so you can actually see this. Daniel Berger is, not Daniel Berger. Billy Horschel is 112th in strokes gained approaching the green, and paying $9,700. That's not my favorite thing to do, so I would pass on that. Why can't I scroll over? There we go. And then if you take a look at Adam Scott, obviously withdrew. Charles Schwartzel, that is, I don't want to pay $9,400 for somebody who's like ranked outside the top 100 in basically every strokes gained statistics this year. I wouldn't really want to do that. Tony Finau, $9,300. His odds per dollar, as you can see, are very good, and Finau is going to garner a ton of ownership because none of these other plays in the 9K range look very appealing right now, and there aren't many options. Finau is going to take a ton of ownership, and just because he's going to take a ton of ownership, that means that in GPPs on a high variance course, I probably wouldn't want to try to invest in that too much. And Ben On at $9,200. It kind of stinks because basically everybody, me, Danny Max, have all been very pro Ben On for pretty much the entire year, and actually probably longer than that, the past couple of years. This is a tough spot because he obviously nearly won last week. He lost in the playoff to Bryson DeChambeau. And it's and actually, shoot, his NA, these NAs that are popping up here are actually a name glitch. But Ben On, as you know, very good strokes gained tee to green player, kind of like an average putter, but he's been showing up positively in the strokes gained putting regression tool here and everything like that. So that kind of gives you an idea of why we've been generally pro Ben On here. The only thing I'm wondering now is because he did so well last week, and Tony Finau really is the only other option. I'm a little afraid Ben On's ownership is going to get kind of inflated here as a result, and it's not like an inflated ownership at $9,200 for Ben On. And when I say inflated for Ben On, I'm talking like 15%. I don't think he's going to be like 25%, but I don't know. It's one of those things where I would just say like a DJ and Stenson and then just going in that 7K range sounds a lot more appealing. If you want a pivot here in this like upper 8K, lower 9K range, Ben On's probably my favorite. I'm just a little unsure about this ownership because it's good. It's just good. There aren't that many options in here, and so it's like Ben On's ownership has to be minimum like 10 to 15%. I don't think it would get too much higher than 15, which is fine if you want to do that for $9,200. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but again, it's like the best pivot option I can really ask or really say because none of these other guys here in this 9K range, I'm really thrilled about given their certain circumstances. Joaquin Niemann, really talented 19-year-old. You saw that on display last week. I just think Ben On's a better player at this point, but Niemann, I do think, is a rising star. Certainly, you've seen it with the tee to green game and how he can pound the ball. I mean, and he's got phenomenal swing and everything like that. Like, he's got superb talent. There's no doubt about it. And Stricker, I've actually been quietly recommending a lot of the weeks and has been doing reasonably well so far in tournaments. 8,800, that's a little steep for him and everything like that. If he was upper 7K range, it'd be way different, but that's just a little expensive to me for Stricker. So you kind of get the idea of what I'm getting at here. I'll touch on the forum on the guys in the 6 and 7K range to give you some of my favorite plays there. But you get the idea. Stenson, DJ, kind of my favorite, just cash and GPP plays. Ben On if you want to have kind of a little bit of a pivot. So that's it. Thanks for watching. And so U.S. Open is next week, and so I will be trying to crank out a video on the U.S. Open here by and actually this the next couple of days here before this weekend, and that's just going to talk about the U.S. Open as far as Shinnecock and what the golf course is and just what I would kind of look at strategy wise. There won't be it'll be a relatively short video, but I just want to give you a preview of it and just kind of what we're going to be looking for. The reason why I'm going to do it a little bit on the early end is because on Friday I do start this new medical device thing that I'm going to be trying out. I hate the timing of this just because it is leading into the U.S. Open, and so I'm going to be a little bit I'm going to be pretty preoccupied with that, but at the same time, I'm going to be doing some of the U.S. Open stuff. So the worst case scenario is that I'm going to give you this U.S. Open preview video as far as just the golf course and everything here over the next couple of days before I start this thing, and then you'll still have all the PGA Tours or all the statistics on their website, the odds per dollar, the putting regression tool, the tee to green regression tool, all that type of stuff will still be up on the website. But I don't know if there's going to be a second tee to green video as far as talking about the top plays. But what I will do at the very least is go be in the forum and just be mentioning which guys I like the most and reasons why. I'd be happy to discuss in forum posts when I can and everything like that, just because my schedule's going to get thrown around here really randomly and kind of unpredictably here potentially over the next week or two once I start this thing. And so that's the worst case scenario. Hopefully I can still do the video and just be on the same type of schedule next week. But just giving you the heads up that unfortunately on the timing of all this that it may not work out to be quite the same availability and do the same tee to green top players episode. But I will do the best I can one way or the other and just kind of keep you guys informed. So just a heads up on that. And anyways, thanks again for watching. Thanks again for all this for all the love on the YouTube videos with the likes of the videos, the subscriptions, and everything like that. You can hit me up on Twitter at Nikki Skevich and Daily Fantasy Winners on Twitter at DFantasyWinners. All right, good luck, everybody.